Hello everybody out there in the Bookverse, it's Stephanie, and today I am going to be talking about something that's probably going to be a little controversial with some people, but I am going to be talking about the problem that I had with Little Women. Sometimes I feel like reading these classics, it's almost like they're classics, so they're amazing and you have to take them as how they are, and you can like look at the symbolism and the interpretation and all the great things that they do, but you can't really pick apart the things that you don't like about them or the issues that they have without people kind of jumping down your throat about it. So today I'm going to talk about some of the things that I didn't necessarily like about Little Women, or some of the issues that I had with it. If you are new to my channel, hey, welcome. Thank you so much for watching my videos. If you would like to see more from me, hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon so you'll be notified when I post new content. But let's jump into this because there are a few things. Now, starting out, I want to throw a disclaimer on here that I have no special or specific training in literary reviewing or any type of literature degree whatsoever. I am not a classics expert, and I am never going to claim to be. I am just a normal, everyday person who reads a lot of books and enjoys reading, and I enjoy reading classics as well. So, that being said, we are going to talk about Little Women. I actually really liked this book. I think I gave it a 3 or 4 stars, 3 stars, I think. I liked it. It was good. I liked the first half better than the second half, but I thought it was a good book and I really did enjoy my time reading it. I'm just going to pick out some things in here that I have a little bit of tea to talk about. So the first issue that I have with this book is that it is too long. It's not really exciting enough, in my opinion, to warrant a 500 plus page book. You're not doing any type of world building. You're not really setting up for any big climactic event. There's not a lot of information that we need to be able to understand this story. I think it just kind of dragged on a little bit longer than it needed to. I do understand that this book was meant to be 2 separate books. So there is the first half and the second half, and they are separated, but in our kind of modern way that we're doing it, we put these books together and make it one book, Little Women. So I do understand that, but I still feel like it was too long. I got a lot less invested in their stories as it went along because it just dragged on and it wasn't exciting enough to keep me invested throughout the whole story. Along the same lines of kind of the format setup of the book, I'll jump into my next thing that I really was not expecting in this book, and that was the way that the chapters are pretty much these little short moral stories. So you'll get into the chapter and it'll follow chronologically the last chapter. So you are going in that correct order of it, but it's kind of almost its own separate story, but they follow along, if that makes sense. So it's not jumping, you're in the same spot and then you move on to the next story. And each of these chapters kind of have their own moral that go along with them, it seems like to me. So you'll get into the story, you'll be reading along in the chapter, and then something happens, and then the girls learn a lesson, and then their mom has to explain the lesson to them at the end of the chapter. Even though we read the whole chapter, we know the story, we get the lesson that was taught, but somehow we need it explained to us by their mom in the majority of these chapters. So that was a little bit annoying to me. I felt like they were just spoon feeding us the lessons from this story. And it was a very, very morally focused book. This book really did focus on morals a lot, which was something I also wasn't expecting going into it. I know that time period was very morals and religious focused, but I just didn't expect this to just be trying to teach us lessons throughout the whole thing. It's not so much a story of their lives as a story of them learning these moral and religious lessons along the way. So it's not necessarily an issue that I had with the book, but just something that I wasn't expecting going into the book. And so it put me off a little bit because I didn't see it coming. The next thing that I have to talk about is their dad. So at the beginning of the book, this isn't a spoiler, at the beginning of the book, we learn that their father is off in the Civil War, and he has left his wife and his 4 daughters at home to fend for themselves. Now, when I first read this, I assumed that he had gone off to fight in the war because that happened a lot. Maybe he had been drafted into it, or maybe he was already in the army, or he joined to fight. But that's actually not the case. You learn as you go along. He is not able to fight, and so he volunteered to join the army as a chaplain. Now, this is a completely 100% personal opinion, but I don't feel that that is necessarily a position that warrants you to leave your family. So he left his wife and his 4 young daughters to take care of themselves. And at this time period, women really weren't as capable of taking care of themselves as they are later on in like the United States history. At this time, you really did kind of need a man there to take care of you financially, or you needed a fortune in place that you could take care of yourself financially. Otherwise, it was a very big struggle for these women to take care of themselves because there really weren't opportunities for them as much at this time. And it makes it very clear that they don't have money and they don't have anyone in place to help take care of them, and they are just fending for themselves and taking care of themselves. And these girls are young. I think the youngest one's maybe 11 or 12, and the oldest one potentially 15 or 16. I can't remember the exact ages, but they're very young. The 2 eldest aren't even going to school anymore, and they have jobs that they are like working on. And I think actually the 3rd daughter stays at home and does all the home chores. And then the youngest one is the only one that goes to school anymore. So in my opinion, I feel like someone else could have filled that role in the army. Someone who's maybe retired or doesn't have a family to take care of, or like has a fortune in place so they don't need to. So I just feel like leaving your family in that type of situation where, I mean, he could die and they would have no one to take care of them, but he's not actually out there fighting the war. There are other people who could have filled that position, I feel like. And he, like, leaving his family, I don't know, was necessarily the most noble choice here when they had no one to take care of them. But along those same lines, I'm going to move into another thing that I felt was kind of off about the book, is the fact that they complained almost constantly about being poor, yet they had a housekeeper. I mean, gosh, I feel like I'm not poor, but I don't have a housekeeper to take care of my stuff for me. So I just don't see how poor they really could have been when they have a housekeeper that's pretty much a full-time employee that they pay to cook their meals and take care of their house for them. So yeah, that's another issue that I had with this book. The next couple are 2 of the main morals that are taught in these stories, these chapters as we're going along. And one of them, Meg goes to a party, this dance, and her friends dress her up and she looks all nice and pretty and she is having a good time with her friends. But the moral that's kind of pushed in this story is that kind of dressing up and doing the rich people things when you're not rich is not a good thing. Like, you should just accept who you are and not try to act above your station. But when I was reading the chapter, I didn't really feel that Meg was doing that. I thought she was just having fun with her friends. She was dressing up and she was just having a good time. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. But the chapter really beat her on this one, acting like she was being such a horrible person and forgetting who she was and just acting like she was terrible for dressing up and going to a party. I didn't agree with that one for sure. And another one that I really struggled with, and I feel like a lot of people might agree with me on this one might not be an unpopular opinion actually, is the burning of the book. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but I feel like this is such an old book that giving spoilers isn't necessarily so much of an issue because this was written like 100 years ago or something like that. So 150, sorry, this is 150th anniversary edition, so at least that long. Spoiler alert, if that bothers you, but Amy burns Jo's book for a really minor reason, that Jo didn't let her go to the theater with them. And so spitefully, she burns Jo's book. Jo comes home and is understandably very upset with Amy. This isn't the time where you have backups on your hard drives and you have SD card copies of it and you have a couple hard copies as well. This is a time when everything in this novel that she's been working on for years and has poured so much time and love and effort into has been burned and is completely gone because her sister was mad that she didn't get to go to a play with them. And the moral taught in this chapter is not you shouldn't burn your sister's book just because you're mad at her. That's mean. The moral taught in this is Jo should forgive her immediately because she's her sister and you should always forgive and you shouldn't hold grudges. Which, fair enough, you should forgive, you shouldn't hold grudges, but she burned her book, got no punishment whatsoever, and the moral of the chapter is Jo should be forgiving her, not that Amy should not have burned her book in the first place. I think that's crazy. I think the moral for me is don't burn your sister's book. That's mean. Like, that's very important to her. Don't be petty. And Jo, of course, held out on forgiving her for a while because she was mad. And I think that's kind of justified. I don't know many people who are that big of a person that they can forgive right away when someone does something that mean to them. It takes a little bit of time, but the whole time her mom's just like, you need to forgive her, you need to forgive her, you need to forgive her. And then at the end, Jo's like, you're right, I'm a terrible person for not forgiving her. This is all my fault. I take all the blame for not forgiving her. I am horrible. And I'm like, what? No, I'd be like, you know what? Maybe you should have grounded her for burning my book. Or maybe she should have gotten some sort of punish for burning my book. I don't know. That really rubbed me the wrong way and I did not enjoy it at all. Also, just a tiny little thing, but I thought I'd throw it in here. It bugs me that they call her Marmee. I'm sure it was a time period thing and it was totally normal at that time, but it drives me nuts. The last and final thing that I'm going to talk about is probably going to be extremely controversial, but going into this book, I felt like Jo was going to be this amazing feminist icon and she was just going to blow my mind with how forward thinking she was and how ahead of her time she was with her feminist views. And I feel like it was slightly more in the movie, this most recent adaptation. I saw that a little bit more in Jo's character, and so I liked it better in the movie. But in this book, I feel like she was definitely a tomboy and she wanted to do things that weren't necessarily womanly or what a girl would be doing at that time. I feel like she kind of conformed throughout the book. She started off so much more feminist and tomboy and she was saying she'd never get married, which I'm not saying marriage is a bad thing. It was just pretty much the only option for girls at the time. So she's like, I don't want that route. I want to be a writer. I want to be famous. I want to publish books and be this great, amazing, famous author. And so I was like, wow, like, yeah, that's not something you'd see at that time at all. But as the book went on, I feel like she changed and conformed more. Like she stopped dressing like a tomboy and she started dressing more like a girl, which, like, I'm not saying any of these things are bad. I just was not expecting them when I expected Jo to be this really feminist character. Just clarifying that. But as the book goes on, she does start to kind of change how she is to conform more to being that time period's expectations. She does write her book and she gets published and she's an author, but then by the end, she's not really as focused on her writing anymore. She doesn't really seem to care about it as much towards the end of the book, and it's not really a priority for her because she ends up getting married, having children, becoming a teacher, which are all things that are very common for women to do at that time, and that's not really anything unique or different for them to do. I'm not saying it's a bad route. It's just not the route I was expecting from her from the beginning, I thought she was going to go on and become this amazing published author. She was going to make these groundbreaking moves in like writing for women and all these things, but I feel like she even like kind of changed her writing to make it conform more to that time period's expectations of what a woman writer would be writing. And so that was different. And also I feel like she cared so much about this man's opinion of her that she changed a lot of her thoughts and beliefs to conform to his, and she did end up marrying him and those things. So I just was a little bit disappointed in Jo as a character. I loved her so much in the first half of the book, and I thought she was amazing and just like awesome and boss, and I had such high expectations for her, but I feel like she just changed so much throughout the book that by the end, I felt like she was really more similar to the rest of her family than she was to how unique she was at the beginning of the book. Again, I feel like this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but that's my thoughts. So those are some of my issues with Little Women. If you have any thoughts on these, definitely let me know down in the comments. I would love to have a conversation about these things. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from me, hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to have me read any other classics and kind of pick apart little things that I did not expect or enjoy as much in the books, let me know down below and I will try to pick those up, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.